Hello and back on the continent. You know we love a bit of continuity because we like to check that you're listening to the podcast as well as watching us here on YouTube. Presumably you're subscribed to both. And on Thursday last, we were talking in great anticipation about the match between Napoli and Inter, which took place last Saturday. If not a potential title decider, certainly one that could have big influence on what's going to happen for the rest of the Italian season and where the Scudetto might end up eventually. David Cartledge, a man of great taste, had it as his game of the week. And it was a really wise choice because even though it wasn't goal-mongers, ending in a 1-1 draw, it was just a really satisfying watch in every possible way. And with Atalanta not taking their chance to beat No Hopers Venezia earlier in the day, it meant it's as you were at the top in Serie A. So you have Inter top, Napoli a point further back and 2 further points back to Atalanta. So all 3 of them still in it. But I guess the interesting thing at the back of this, the fact that Napoli have had a chastening couple of weeks, one way and another, is the fact that Napoli come out of this in the same position, but probably emboldened for the rest of the season. There was a feeling, certainly in the Italian media, that Napoli were the moral victors, if there could be one of this game at the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona. And we talked when we previewed it on the continent earlier in the week, the fact that Napoli had a chance to respond in the same way as they had done the last time they played Inter, going back to autumn, where, of course, they'd lost a home game, Napoli against Atalanta, 3-0 at home, and they were given a right schooling, particularly by Ademola Lookman on that day. And Antonio Conte came out and said afterwards, well, this is why we're not equipped for the title. This is why Atalanta are a much more credible title challenger than we are. And whether that was something to motivate his team or whether he actually meant it, I suspect a little bit of both. It really worked because they went to Inter the following week. They took the lead, ended up drawing 1-1. Hakan Çalhanoğlu missed a penalty, which is rare as hen's teeth. It's the only time he's ever missed a penalty for Inter. He hit the post with his spot kick in that game. But there was a feeling coming out the back of that Napoli had responded well, that they'd shown they not only had style, which we've associated Napoli sides with in recent years, be it the team that nearly won the title under Maurizio Sarri, the team that actually did win the title under Luciano Spalletti, or even this one now at certain occasions, although I know there will be some of you out there going, oh no, that's not Antonio Conte football. Well, occasionally it is Antonio Conte football. But it definitely gave us a sense that they were pulling all in Conte's direction, the players, that his messages were getting through. Now, I hate to do this, but every time we talk about Napoli and what they're doing in Serie A this season, we have to do a little recap right to the beginning of the season. That opening game where they lost 3-0 at Verona, where they looked an absolute shambles. And Conte kind of looked around afterwards and thought, oh, really? Is this what I'm meant to be doing this season? The fact that they have gone on from there and become a title challenger is a huge credit to all those players, and it's a huge credit to Antonio Conte. In a way, I suppose you can make the link to the team that won the title under Luciano Spalletti in 22-23, because at the start of that season, you'll remember if you've been listening to On the Continent as well, that we talked about it at the time, the fact that at the start of that season, Spalletti is arguing with fans at a forum as they're going, well, what's happened to Dries Mertens? Why was there no announcement when the top scorer of all time for this great club left? And he's left there having to field these questions on behalf of the board, that there's this sense of dislocation, that there's this sense that there hasn't been enough investment in the team. And of course, that's why when Antonio Conte comes in as Napoli coach, you think, realistically, how long is this going to last for? Not just because Napoli is a club known for blow-ups that should be behind the scenes but are really conducted in public, but also because Conte is Conte. Now, this performance against Inter at the weekend is so convincing that it's done something to Antonio Conte. And I think working with this team has done something to Antonio Conte this season. We think of him as someone who's got ridiculously high standards, who's perpetually dissatisfied, whether he's tearing out Buffon at the end of his debut season in charge of Juventus, the unbeaten season in which they win the league, having finished 7th the year before, whether he's arguing the toss over transfer policy at Inter, whether he's complaining about everything at Spurs. And of course, a lot of English viewers, that will be possibly your last vivid memory of Antonio Conte before he left the Premier League. And you think about the way that Napoli are run, they're not big spenders. And how do you satisfy Antonio Conte in this context? Because, of course, if we look at him from the perspective of when he was at Tottenham, to satisfy the demands that he normally has for signings and for having the perfectly furnished squad, it's always really expensive. And to do that in a Premier League context would probably require more money than Manchester City have got, never mind what Tottenham have at their disposal. And there was always a sense that the way that Napoli are run by Aurelio De Laurentiis is not entirely dissimilar to what Daniel Levy does with Tottenham. Fairly prudent, making sure the business runs efficiently, to the eternal frustration of supporters, really. And that's why it makes it so amazing that A, Napoli are where they are, B, Conte's happy, and C, the guy who scores the equaliser against Inter. We'll come to Philip Billing in a little minute, because I think it's a great little story. But if we look at Conte, his reaction after this draw with Inter at the weekend was, I'm really pleased with the performance, and we've done extraordinary things so far this season. And what this has shown me, this game, is that we'll be fighting to the end. So I think he realises there are limitations in his team. And he realises that maybe he's not the guy who can go in and say, take the best team in the league anymore. You know, there are not those opportunities for him. Of course, he ends up at Napoli because maybe he's burnt bridges elsewhere, of course. Juventus, Inter maybe would have been a destination for him. But there was, of course, the fact that Simone Inzaghi's been doing a brilliant job there, and he's built a really great team over the last couple of years. Milan are in a particularly funny financial position. Of course, we might end up talking on OTC about Sergio Conceição and how he seems in danger at the moment, and the club's running really badly above the pitch and above the coaching level at the moment. They're perhaps even looking for a new sporting director, Milan, at the moment, according to press reports. Maybe ask a question about it on Ask OTC if you want to know about it. But look, I think the really interesting thing is the fact that Conte almost ended up finding this marriage of convenience with Napoli. They needed someone to blow away the cobwebs of what was an awful title defence last season, going through all those coaches and finishing 10th, and it being just a really miserable experience post Spalletti. And Conte maybe not being able to, as I say, get that pinnacle job that he was once able to get. But really, Napoli and Conte are bringing the best out of each other. And that grit that they have, that refusal to buckle, even in difficult situations. And remember, they didn't win for the whole of February. To see a reaction like this is pretty amazing. It would have been a travesty if they didn't get a point from this. I think the fact that they meaningfully hauled themselves back into the game and got something for it, even if they extended their winless run to 5 games, it's extraordinary, really. It shows it's all about context. The fact that they got themselves this extended winless run, but they came out of it feeling like winners. And the fact that Philip Billing scored the equaliser, I think, is particularly notable as well. Maybe there are some out there who are like, oh, okay, he's not at Bournemouth anymore. Well, he still belongs to Bournemouth, of course, because he's on a loan. Napoli will complete a purchase of him later on. But there are a few little signs about Billing. In fact, in the celebrations, the raucous celebrations after his equaliser right at the end, there were some little homemade placards and banners in the crowd about him. And one of them saying, if he signs, I'll sign as well, which I think really sort of underlines the fact that he was quite an underwhelming signing. Now, look, Philip Billing's been a capable performer in the Premier League, but if you're Antonio Conte, you've lost Kvaratskhelia, you need a bit of reinforcement. I think you're hoping for someone a little bit more vaunted. And, we talked about Ngonge before. These are the kind of signings that have been De Laurentiis Napoli signings in the past. Players who you think can do an okay job. But the feeling is always, I think from a lot of Napoli fans in particular, that De Laurentiis is kind of cutting corners. Now, as we said on the podcast before, I think you have to bear in mind the context at which he picked them up, which was virtual financial ruin. He's built them back up since. He's wanted the club to wash its own face, which I think is completely reasonable. But it's frustrating when it comes to chasing for fans, when it comes to chasing titles or retaining titles, which has been really difficult to do. And I think the way that they've mismanaged the relationships that they had with Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia have come down to the fact that De Laurentiis is really quite frugal, and that's been an issue. So when Kvaratskhelia goes, and they're talking at the start of January about, he could be replaced with Alejandro Garnacho, and then before you know it, you're in the fourth week of January and you're trying to sign Alan Saint-Maximin on loan, and you can't even get that over the line. You end up signing Noah Okafor on loan after a previous move of his fell through because he failed the medical, and you get Billing. I think there's a sense amongst the fans of, is that it? Now, Conte, unlike him, has put quite a brave face on that publicly and said, look, we've got to just go with what we're going to go with. The other problems for them, as we've mentioned, is not just the fact that Kvaratskhelia has gone, but David Neres, who was replacing him very well, got injured. He's not going to be back for a couple of weeks, and he could be a really timely boost for them. And that Romelu Lukaku has fallen out of nick as well, not scored since the end of January, when he scored the winner from the penalty spot against Juventus at the Maradona. So the fact that you look at the bench when they're a goal down against Inter, and you think, where is the inspiration coming from? We know that Inter have got a better squad. We know that Inter have the best squad in Italy. And, you look at them playing in the Coppa Italia earlier in the week in the quarter-final against Lazio, and because they have this big game, they rest 8 players. That is not a luxury available to Napoli. And when they're missing Andre Frank Zambo-Anguissa, who's been an outstanding player for them over the last 3 seasons, you think, okay, they're in a bit of trouble. Now, look, Billy Gilmour came in and played really well for as long as he did play, until he was replaced actually by Billing, with, I think, the idea that we'll get a bit of height and we'll get a bit more late run into the penalty box by bringing Billing in, and that's exactly how it worked out. Conte coached it really, really well. But there's not the sense that there's an embarrassment of riches, and that means there's an enormous reliance on the players that are in that 11, be it Buongiorno at the back, who's been an absolute revelation, be it Anguissa, who wasn't able to make this game, Scott McTominay, who was again fantastic on the day and tested out Josep Martinez into goal a couple of times, or be it Lukaku. Now, I think Lukaku really is the key to this, because if we're talking about Napoli finding that punch up front, it's always been in Conte teams over the recent times about the relationship between Conte and Lukaku. He's brought the very best out of Lukaku. And I know Lukaku's a couple of years older now. He's had a couple of intermittent seasons. But if he gets to, say, 15 goals this season, he's got 9 in the league so far, I think Napoli have got a great chance of doing something. Now, he didn't score at the weekend, but he got himself in some really good spots against his old club. They were forced to defend really well to stop him from scoring. And I see just a little glimmer of the old Lukaku there, which is absolutely vital for them going forward. Now, of course, what's also vital for Napoli going forward, not only does Conte know they can fight for this title, but you look at their remaining fixture list, it's actually quite clement. You could argue that their most difficult game is the next one that they've got, which is next Sunday. They're at home again against Fiorentina, who are challenging for those Champions League places. Now, the following home game after that is Milan, and goodness knows what to expect from them at the moment. Napoli are better than them. I think we can say that quite clearly at the moment, and whatever's going wrong behind the scenes at Milan is not going to be cleared up in a couple of weeks. I mean, they're looking as if they're going to struggle to reach Europe, let alone the Champions League again, in the remainder of this season. But if you look at Neres being fit in a couple of weeks, if you look at Lukaku maybe recovering some of his best form, and you look at that fixture list and the fact that they don't have any other games to play apart from the ones in Serie A, I think it makes it pretty clear, together with this fighting spirit, that Napoli are really in this race still. Obviously, that's much easier to say on a Monday after Billing scored and they didn't lose that game on Saturday, which was absolutely vital for them. Hope you've enjoyed this. Remember to like and subscribe to the On the Continent YouTube channel. And of course, remember to subscribe on your favourite podcatcher to the pod coming out every Thursday with me and Dotun Adebayo. And we answer your questions either here, if you're living below the line, or on Ask OTC with me, Dotun, and guests every Friday. Do join us.